Thank you everyone for joining us for this first recording as we look at how coronavirus is impacting on businesses. The aim of this is a discussion-based conversation around the topics, looking first of all at what the government are doing and being able to consider that and think about what that means for businesses, but also for the issues that businesses are actually facing and trying to be helpful really in terms of what we're talking about. We've got a number of people that have joined us for this virtual business lounge in terms of conversations. And as we go through this, they'll be kind of contributing and telling us a little bit more about the different aspects, but also hopefully interacting with each other and trying to help each other make sense of this. Hopefully everyone finds this helpful. And after this recording, if people want to ask further questions, please let us know. We're aiming to do this regularly over a number of weeks. So if there are topics that we've not covered off and you'd like to talk about, let us know, message into any one of us, and we'll make sure in future weeks that actually we pick up on that and talk it through. If the need is more urgent than that, please message us as well. And across the whole of the ecosystem, there are people out there really trying to help businesses at this point in time. But obviously these are difficult times for businesses. Just going to very quickly, in terms of regulars on the call, there's myself, Mark Sykes, Liam O'Doherty, and also Kerry Bailey. And we're just going to kind of make sure over the next few weeks we're covering off the different topics that need to be discussed. Also joining us, we've got people from other organisations to address the relevant topics as they arise. So we want this to be fairly focused, and so without further ado, going to kick off with various things. The first one being actually what is it that the government are doing? So first of all, Liam, it'd be useful kind of delays to tax payments. There's a whole raft of different measures here that the government have introduced to kind of buy time for people. Are you okay just to pick up on some of those, and if people do chip in and ask questions as we go through this?
Yeah, sure. I think you're right in saying that there's almost an unprecedented raft of measures introduced, and the three in particular, which I think are probably the most urgent sort of firefighting type issues, we're just going to spend a little bit of time on. I mean, I think they're right to pay, the deferral of the VAT, and then some of the changes around sort of PAYE and particularly the job retention scheme. If I could just introduce sort of Craig Aspinall first, who's sort of our time to pay expert. Craig, do you want to just sort of recap what we've actually been seeing in practice around sort of time to pay?
Yeah, no problem. So there has been a relaxation of the sort of the time to pay rules by HMRC in response to the COVID pandemic. In particular, a deferral on sort of immediate liabilities. We're seeing in practice at the moment that where businesses contact the dedicated helpline that HMRC have set up, they're pretty much getting 3-month deferral on tax payments without having to provide any detailed information, which is a real deviation onto what the time to pay legislation was previously.
And Craig, just very quickly on that, is that specific sectors or is that any business?
That is any business at all. There is potential that businesses in sectors such as hospitality will get slightly longer, but any business at the moment will get 3 months, pretty much no questions asked.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, and Craig, if businesses are looking at the cash flows and they think or feel that they need more than 3 months, what should they be doing? Should they be sort of just taking the 3 months now and then revisiting that later, or should they be trying to address that now?
I think it's sensible for them to be addressing that now. HMRC are engaging actively with businesses, and if a business knows that a 3-month deferral isn't going to be enough for them in their circumstances, then the best approach would be to talk to HMRC now, because that's going to give you the best chance of getting the best answer for your business.
Yeah, and I suppose the point there is there's no point waiting, is there? If it's there and available, you're better off creating a cash buffer now than waiting.
Correct.
Yeah, Mark, I think that's right, and I think if you look back at sort of the issues that there were in 2008, 2009, as things went on there, the revenue attitude hardened to sort of giving money And the other thing is if firms were honest and upfront and had a clear strategy of how they were going to get through those issues, the revenue again sort of had a far better, far more amenable to deal with those businesses. So being honest and upfront and sort of interacting with the revenue early, I think, has to be a good thing.
That's right. And I think the other key point as well is that at the moment, very unprecedented, HMRC are also waiving late payment interest and surcharges where businesses approach them before the due date of the tax, and as long as a time to pay is agreed, they'll seek to waive any late payment interest, etc. So even more important for businesses that know they might need longer than 3 months to approach that at this stage, because that might not be available forever.
And I suppose linked up then, this is not a right, is it? This is a request.
Correct.
And generally speaking, just doing it and not asking for it, you're into penalties, interest, are you? So
yeah, that's right. So if you were just to take the view that you didn't want to pay your tax and not approach HMRC, then they would just revert to the old rules, of charging interest, pursuing the debts, etc. So it's important to get that contract early.
Yeah, and probably make it later weeks as well, won't it? If at later months, if you've not engaged and just decided to do something.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
And Craig, in terms of the difference or the distinction between VAT time to pays and doing a time to pay on the PAYE, how should businesses approach that? Should they tackle it all in one go, or is it two separate approaches? And is it 3 months on both of those taxes?
So that's a good question. We advise that businesses approach it all at one go. What we have experienced more recently towards the end of last week is that the business would need to engage with different areas of HMRC's time to pay unit. But if they call the hotline, if you like, that HMRC have set up, the call centre specialise in that, and they will put them through to the right people. So they should approach all tax bills at the same time.
So do them all through the COVID hotline, and they will direct you from there to the right person, or cover off both in the one call.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Richard, is it worth you just coming in and touching on the VAT deferral, which is automatic now, isn't it?
Yeah, so I should stress everything we're seeing here is current as at 11 o'clock on Monday morning. And in short, we've seen nothing further than what was announced on Friday, which is basically that UK businesses are automatically eligible to have a VAT deferral. So if you have a VAT payment that's due between now and the end of June, you don't have to pay it. There's no application process. You just don't pay it. Is the long and short of it. The statement was very brief, and there is no further detail behind it. It's completely unprecedented, so we have a whole raft of questions we might ask about it. But in short, if you have an imminent VAT payment coming up, you shouldn't pay it.
Richard, do you know if you still need to do the VAT return? I'm assuming you do still your paperwork as before, but you just don't make the payment. Do we know that, or is that we're waiting to find out?
We are waiting to find out. My recommendation on that would be do your VAT return as normal, but don't make the payment. There's a really important point actually to make around this. If people have VAT payments coming up which are made by direct debit. So at the moment, we don't know if the government is intending to pay direct debit or not. Taxpayers are required to cancel that or not. None of that is in the guidance at the minute, but we'd suggest people keep a very close eye on that. And if in doubt, cancel the direct debit if they qualify.
Okay.
Yeah, and Richard, it's worth noting that this is just a deferral, so it buys some welcome breathing space, but actually it might be that sort of people need to look at their cash flow models and look at other sources of funding. At the moment, the deferral's promised till June, but potentially might go on beyond that. Is that right?
So what it does is the current deferral says if you've got a payment that's due between now and the end of June, you can actually defer that until the end of the financial year. So it gets you into 2021 for any liabilities that crystallise in the next 3 months. So actually what you're getting there is you're getting the thick end of kind of 9 months or 10 months of a deferral potentially, which is great news. But there are broader things that you can look at around managing your cash flow in the intervening period from a VAT perspective, but it's probably more detail than we need on the call today.
Okay.
That's really useful. And,
So,
and
so
the,
I mean,
the
in
other,
terms of delays, sorry, is there anything else, Liam, in terms of actual delays to tax payment before we move on to grants and loans?
yeah, well, I suppose the other area that's very topical at the moment is around sort of employee costs and sort of payroll. I don't know, Nick, whether it's worth just sort of coming in on that, and in particular the job retention scheme.
Well, I think that probably bleeds into Mark's comment there about grants and other support. But a bit like Richard, this position is as at 11 o'clock today. There is very little detail around the coronavirus job retention scheme. However, at face value, it appears to be quite a generous move by the government. Fundamentally, it suggests that the government will fund by means of a grant process 80% of your employee's salary, albeit that's capped at a maximum of £2,500 per month. What's interesting is that the comment also talks about being effective from the 1st of March 2020, so not from Friday. So there is some questions around those businesses who've taken the unfortunate decision to let people go before this announcement. Will they be able to reverse that and seek to take advantage of
So Nick, this might be one for Oliver as well. This is confusing because reading the detail, there's a thing called furloughing the staff, and then there's talking about backdating, but I can't backdate if I furloughed someone or something. I'm slightly confused. So, Nick, Oliver, can you clarify what an employer's meant to do here?
I'm happy to pick up on that, Mark. So if it's backdated to the 1st of March, it can only apply to employees who are still employed. So anyone who's being made redundant, they're out of the equation. And people have already been made redundant as a result of this crisis. For those that are presently laid off, then I believe the employer would have to agree to put them onto furlough status now, and certainly they'd be eligible to claim back wages from the date that's agreed. It remains unclear as to how you backdate it. I suppose in theory you can agree to backdate the leave with the employee, so it was furloughed status, but whether that will be acceptable to HMRC when they start processing these payments remains to be seen.
So furloughing is a phrase which I sat there in Google search this morning. I thought, is it a word I should have always known? But anyway, whatever. In terms of furloughing, it says that the person must not actually do any work. Is that right? Because that seems crazy that they're being paid, but actually you can't then use them to actually carry on doing work. Is that clarified? Is that something we're waiting for clarification on?
I think we are waiting for clarification on it, but taking that as to what it's intended for, I take the job retention scheme as a way of saving jobs. So if an employer was looking at making someone redundant or laying them off without pay at all, that's when the job retention scheme is relevant. If, however, an employer was thinking of putting someone into short-time working, i.e. reduced hours, then the job retention scheme doesn't apply to them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's literally about saving jobs and making sure people aren't left without any pay.
And small print, again, when you read the government guidance, it says normal employment law continues to apply. So I'm sat there with some employees, let's say, I'm sitting there thinking I'm struggling to pay my bills. Great, I can get 80% of the money up to £2,500, all sounding very good. I'm now not sure quite what I need to do to furlough someone. Are we into consultation periods? Are we into whatever the employment contract? I'm confused. Is there anything around that to help?
The detail remains pretty scant at this moment in time. Hopefully we'll get more guidelines this week, but having sort of discussed it with fellow colleagues, our view is that you would need to agree furlough status with the relevant workers. You can't impose it. To do so would be constructive dismissal. Clearly there would be a reduction in wages, which would be a breach of contract if you hadn't agreed it. But, and this is a big but, if you have the right to lay staff off in your contract, or you would have made these individuals redundant, then there's clearly good reason for the employees to consider agreeing to furlough status, because essentially they can sit at home doing nothing yet still receive 80% of the wages, and it means they've got a job to come back to hopefully in 3 to 4 months' time.
Yeah, I think the only thing from my side, what I'd love to see is kind of that, rather than sitting at home because they've been furloughed, they've kept their job because the grants come in, but actually they can carry on doing
Adding
stuff.
value.
Exactly, yeah. And that's a really important thing to people in terms of mental health and wellness, isn't it?
I completely agree, Mike. We've had a very similar discussion within our own business today, and our current view is you can't stop employees volunteering to work. I think the whole point about the job retention scheme is that we're basically saying we can't give you any work, or we can't afford to give you any work. So if they choose to volunteer to come out and help out with whatever it might be, because they choose to do so, I can't see that being illegal. I can't see that being against the job retention scheme. What it can't be is a way of an employer trying to run its business but taking advantage of the grants. Really, they can't be using it to support wages just to, not have to pay anything but keep the operation running completely. So it's a fine line, and hopefully the government guidelines, when it comes out in the next week or so, might give us a bit more detail.
Okay, so thank you very much. Nick, was there anything else on that you wanted to kind of add in around this?
No, I think Oliver's picked up on some of the challenges that employers are going to have around defining the circumstances in which they'll be able to claim for the grant. The mechanics of it could be interesting because they've already admitted there is no mechanism to pay people in this way. But again, as Oliver said, with a bit more detail, hopefully we'll be in a position to be able to understand and deliver this as painlessly as possible. The government rather have said they're trying to get this started in the next couple of weeks with a view to completing the exercise by the end of April, which would suggest they're going to have to get the skates on.
Yeah, I mean, what is nice is the tone of this. This is a real effort to try and protect jobs. I think we all recognise that if you can keep people in work, keep the skill set, then we're in a much better place for recovery. So I think intention's really good. It's the detail now, isn't it, of what does that mean? How do I do it? Where do I get my money from? And businesses need.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been inundated over the weekend with lots and lots of questions around how this is actually going to work, with lots of little quirky scenarios, but we can't really answer that without the government guidelines now. So the sooner they get that out, the better. What I would say is it doesn't necessarily stop businesses taking action now to place employees on furlough status if they are genuinely struggling to continue to employ them. The only thing they need to think about is how are they going to fund the wages, because they won't be able to claim reimbursement back until the end of April. So they've got to fund March, possibly some of April in terms of wages, which they might have started to look at some of the other support mechanisms in place for business.
Okay, so just aware of time, keeping things moving. A couple of other areas here. Don't know if anyone wants to touch on it. SSP for people from day one. Obviously, don't need to go to your doctor to go and be diagnosed. You phone 111, and they basically will give you the necessary guidance around how to certify for that. But there is funding effectively for businesses to cover the first 2 weeks there on statutory sick pay. And anything else on that? Anyone want to touch on?
I think it's only if you've got less than 250 employees, I think, isn't it, on that one?
Correct.
And then cash grants for certain sectors. So again, focus more on the SME businesses, but basically businesses that are eligible for small business rates relief, £10,000 grant available. And in the case of businesses where the rateable value is between £15,000 and £51,000 per premises, a grant of £25,000 coming through for that. That one, I think they have been clear, that's going to be administered through the local authorities, and they will be writing to relevant people and telling them how to get hold of that support and funding. So lots of things in terms of grants. I don't know if anyone else has anything in terms of the grant side of it before we touch on loans.
Not from me.
Okay. So loans, and we've got Sue Bernard on the phone from the British Business Bank. So I think you are the guru in this respect. Business interruption loan scheme. So are you okay to touch on that and just explain a little bit more about what it means for businesses?
Yes, we have gone live this morning with we've shortened it to CBILS, so Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme. So the CBILS lenders are now taking applications from SMEs across the whole of the UK. We have extended the limit up to £5 million per loan, and the government will be providing a guarantee of 80% of any loans.
Yeah.
Some slight changes with regards to there's no fees for this particular loan. We've also introduced 12 months no interest payments for anyone that takes this particular fund. And the good news is that it's available to all sectors, which is obviously which has come out this morning. And we've got full guidance on this programme now on our website. We've got
so we've got a link to that later on, actually, so we'll make sure we share that round. Sue, one of the challenges, and people are already saying this, is we've been here before with small business loans, with ECG loans, etc., where government part guarantee the loan, but then the banks turn around and say, look, with due respect, if we were going to lend, we're going to lend anyhow. If we're not going to lend, we're not going to lend. How do we make sure this really does help businesses in terms of the support they're needing at this time?
We've tried to work with all the lenders. We've had a conference call over the weekend with all of the lenders to try and ensure that they have the appetite to lend under this fund. There's been a lot of discussions with them to make sure it's fit for purpose, because we are in different times. I would say that it is different to EFG and small loans for business. So all I would encourage anyone really is, if you are struggling, then you need to speak to one of the CBILS lenders to have an open discussion. We have made some substantial changes around with the previous loan fund around companies in distress. So we're now looking at this as, yes, if you was in distress before COVID-19 came, then it might be a difficult loan for you to achieve. But if you've been affected since this virus came into play, then we can look at that from a lender point of view. So I think, I do take on board comments from previous loans, but this is very different. We are in different times, and it's definitely worth a conversation if you need it. As we know, the banks have got their own measures in place as well, which is good to see, and we would hope that businesses were taking advantage of that first.
Yeah,
but this is there just in case they can't.
There's some narrative on the press release that you put out this morning, and it kind of talked about preparing the kind of lending requirements, the business plan, as if COVID hadn't happened, really. I think that's the context, isn't it? So if the business was not going to be a good business anyhow, successful, then actually, as you say, it's going to be pretty hard, bumpy ride anyhow. But if you kind of took out COVID and then said, look, here's my business and what's going on, then effectively this is almost saying, so because COVID's happened, we're going to step in, but the business is a good business and we do want to lend. So
exactly.
Okay. But therefore, businesses still need to think about preparing a business plan and think about what that means to excluding the impact of COVID, because COVID's going to run for a while in terms of not just the disease, but I was talking to a business this morning and they're saying their customers are not ordering goods. It could be a while before businesses get back up again and are able to kind of get their supply chains moving. So I assume businesses are not looking just at the pure disease impact of COVID, but looking at the whole interruption, including the potential recessionary impact afterwards.
Yes, you do need to look at the fuller picture, and we know it's difficult and it's different on a sector by sector basis as well. But I think, as I said, what we're saying is, would your business been trading if this COVID was not around? And if you feel it is, then it's worth a conversation with the lender.
So this is up to 6 years, isn't it?
It is. It's up to 6 years, yes.
Up to 45 million turnover business. Anything else?
Yes. We're also looking at overdrafts, invoice finance, asset finance, which is 3 years. So there's other things you could look at. And again, security discretion on anything under 250k. So again, some slight changes to previous ones. So I would just ask anyone, because there is a lot of detail behind this, But we have tried to sort of put it into a format which is easily readable. And if anyone wants that information, it's readily available now, even down to an infographic, just to try and put it all in one place.
That's brilliant. And then the other side alone is then for larger companies with short-term debt issues. I don't know, as I read the details on that, that's basically businesses, this is big business, this is businesses that would have a material impact on the economy. And for those, I think they're saying the Bank of England would be willing to buy debt basically from those businesses over the short term to ensure solvency. So I assume they're envisaging the big businesses on this one, the public names that we all kind of know. But I don't know if anyone's got anything on that they want to mention.
I think my understanding is anyone that falls out of the civils criteria could potentially look at that. But obviously we're still waiting for further guidance. So anyone with 45 million turnover, I think there's been a bit of confusion whether there's something in the middle. And my understanding there isn't at the moment.
That's really helpful, Sue. Thank you. So wait for the details, hopefully more coming, but actually the understanding at the moment is it's not just those big players. It could be actually anything that's not covered by the business interruption loan scheme. Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, all comments being made today are as at today and based on information that we have at the moment. So keep putting that caveat in. Final thing then, on a personal side, and obviously this does help, a bit of noise around self-employed people and another side of things. I don't know if anyone wants to pick up on this, Nick. This might be your area. Sorry to put you on point there. Is there anything in terms of the kind of, from a personal tax point of view, another support that's worth touching on?
Yeah, the first one is there's an ability to defer your payment until January 2021. So rather than paying your interim self-assessment bill, you can defer that until January 2021. Of course, time to pay arrangements also apply to individuals as well as businesses. So there's an ability there for individuals to seek agreement from HMRC in terms of other debts they may have. I can't comment on housing benefit and universal tax credits, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I think all that's there is that there is a enhancements to those things. So universal tax credit, the bit there is also self-employed people
Yes.
will benefit from that side. So there is support there, but basically an enhancement to universal tax credit. Also in terms of housing benefit enhancement to help people continue being able to afford and pay for their rents. So that's kind of the main points there. Sorry, Nick.
Okay, that's fine. And then on the I-35, as most people have seen, the proposed implementation of the private sector reforms has been pushed back by 12 months, which creates some interesting conundrums if, for example, you are a diligent business who is preparing for the reforms to start from this April, and you identified a series of workers who would be within the scope of IR35. You should take great care if you continue to use those individuals via their PSCs without considering your criminal offences risk. Because if these individuals were deemed to be within the scope of IR35 under the proposed new rules, then there is a good chance that they are actually deemed employees. And whilst the accountability of tax and national insurance would then sit with those individual workers and their own PSCs, clearly, if you are seen to not be doing something to manage your risk or to ensure that there's no tax evasion, then you're potentially at risk for a claim under CCO. So there's some work there that needs to be done for engagers and hirers to put an education process, I suspect.
Brilliant. Listen, so those are the main bits in terms of government support that's out there. So next slide, and Kerry, I'm going to look to you on this because you're the expert in this. You've done this, helping businesses through the last recession as well, and the impact from that. I have a business. I hear of all this support, but I'm on my knees. I'm literally not sure where the next orders are coming from. People are not visiting my business anymore, etc. What do I need to do? Where can I go to actually get critical help at this point in time? So we've talked to some of these. What should I be doing straight away?
So I think that as well as looking at the measures that have obviously been announced by the government in terms of financial support, etc., I think what many businesses are also doing is they're already looking at their existing financial arrangements and speaking to their existing lenders to work out what, if anything, is available to them. So, look carefully at your current banking arrangements and think about whether you've got any undrawn funds already available to you, which you can be drawing down now, for example, revolving credit facilities, etc. In addition, make sure you check in your banking documents carefully to see whether you need any waivers or consent required, and make sure that you're flagging those up early with your lenders. And then start thinking about whether you can do general refinancing or extending existing financing arrangements. That would be the obvious place to start. The other place to start is actual practical day-to-day things. So looking at your workforce, making sure that you're taking advantage of whether you should be laying off, whether you should be making redundancies. Speak to your landlords. We are seeing unprecedented levels of work in terms of negotiating with landlords. Most of the landlords are being extremely receptive to payment holidays. Typically, we're seeing 1 to 3 months, and then people are agreeing, the tenants are agreeing that they will keep landlords posted. So certainly get onto that immediately. Yeah. With regards to the rates position, obviously we've seen the stuff that has been announced generally with regard to the businesses that can take advantage of the 12-month rate holiday. But what we are saying to everybody is basically go off and see if there are any other schemes, if there's anything available from your local authorities that might be able to assist you.
Yeah, and Kerry, that's a really important point. I mean, we're talking to the LEPs and the chambers at the moment. They're all the time, I mean, all weekend, people are having conversations to say, what can we do to support businesses in our area? So, again, talking to a business this morning, they had been talking to the chamber, who were incredibly supportive of them, making sure they're aware of everything, and just making sure that any other grants or support that might be out there is being made available. So it is worth talking to your chambers, talking to your local enterprise partnerships as well. That's what they're there for, and so therefore they are incredibly helpful organisations at this time. So definitely look around, particularly if there's other grants and short-term funding options available. Sorry.
Yeah, they are being really helpful, because obviously the rates holiday is really just for the retail, hospitality and leisure businesses, but we've seen a number of them where there's been key employers in the area. They've approached their authorities and they've agreed deals with them. So it's definitely worth asking the question. And the other thing that you need to start doing is obviously start looking at your supply chain. We saw yesterday some announcements that certain big retailers have triggered clauses within their contracts with their supply chains, and they've just cancelled all orders coming in of goods. That's going to have a massive knock-on. However, if you are a business and you've got orders out there and you're looking like you're needing to mothball your business, then you need to be looking at those measures yourselves and seeing what's in your contract, speaking to your lawyers. Are there some clauses in there that you could be triggering to stop stocks coming in, and see if you can manage your cash flow position?
And Kerry, I think that's a really important point. Whatever others are doing, if you don't, in some ways, look after it, look after the same actions yourself, you're just going to get squeezed in the middle. So, unfortunately, things like supply chain, working capital, payment terms, raising invoices on time, making sure your VAT documentation is up to date if you're in a reclaim situation, and so forth, you've got to carry that on, because otherwise, if you let that slip, your working capital cycle is going to grow, and in effect, you are the funder of the entire supply chain, and you will have that pressure on you, won't you, where people start to try and see if they can get away with paying you a bit slower, or just stretching out the amount of strain you're taking through that entire chain.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, it's more important than ever, isn't it, that you try to maintain your systems as robustly as possible, collecting in your book debts and doing what you can to ease your cash flow pressures.
Yeah.
But I think, going back to Sue's point as well, I think it's very important that people start thinking, almost going off for this lending and funding that might be available, it is now going to be done on a look-back basis rather than a look-forward basis. So it's important that businesses are very quickly making sure that they've got that information available, because a number of businesses that we go into where the quality of the information to enable you to do that assessment isn't there, make sure that that information is readily available, because a quick decision is the thing that's going to be able to free up your cash flow.
Okay, Kerry, thank you. I don't know, anyone else want to make some comments about what businesses should be right now if they're on their knees effectively needing that help? What is it that they actually can do and should be looking for? We're going to in future weeks pick up on the slower things like building resilience plans and so forth, but right now it's that critical situation. What any advice people have got for businesses out there?
From myself, Mark, just going back to the job retention scheme, there's a real opportunity here for them to cut their overheads very quickly by using the job retention scheme. So act quickly on that and then take advice from other professionals around what they can do.
Great, thank you. Anything else?
Hi, Matt. Yeah, I've got some advice. I think we're getting a lot of approaches directly from the SME community, which we can understand that. But our main advice is to speak to your financial intermediaries. That I think that's the best way forward, or the lenders directly. Yeah. We're currently bombarded at the moment with a lot of calls, and we just need to fill them out correctly going forward.
Yeah, and again, we've got instances and examples where businesses have just spoken to their lenders, and their lenders have said, yes, that's fine, have a payment holiday, or extending out overdraft facilities. So slightly different to the last crisis where it was all focused on the actual banks and the lending itself. This is a different situation. So actually what we're seeing at the moment is lenders are being generally helpful and supportive, but again, they're still commercial organisations, so therefore it's about business case and helping them understand why they should do that. So yeah, thank you, Sue, that's great. Anything else people want to add at this time?
Just for myself, it would be, look at your immediate cash flow, your immediate tax liabilities upcoming, particularly pay as you earn and corporation tax. And if you are looking like you're struggling with the cash to meet those liabilities, engage with HMRC now to get those advantageous deferrals under the time to pay arrangements.
Great. Sorry, someone else was just.
Yeah, no, Mark, it was Liam. Just to say, I mean, I think the one thing that is clear is there's a myriad of different options for businesses to look at. So I think that's been the heartwarming sort of bit around this, how quickly government have responded and how the business community in general has sort of created a number of avenues to support businesses. So if you are struggling, I think have a good look around at all the options because there are plenty at the moment.
Brilliant. Right, so very quickly, just touch on one other topic and sharing with you here something we've done as a firm, but it is actually really important for businesses to think about. So we've talked a lot about the funding, that is the crisis point, but businesses also need to carry on, and therefore it's important to think about actually putting together a kind of business continuity plan reflecting this time. And so effectively, getting the business to think very carefully about its priorities at this time, identifying the people, the roles and responsibilities so that everyone knows what they're meant to be doing. It's not business as usual anymore. So therefore, ensuring people know what their priorities are, what's expected of them, making sure managers, etc., are engaging with the teams around them, making sure operations people know that operations are carrying on operating properly, and just a bit clarifying roles, responsibilities and deliverables and who needs to do what. Decision making, it's worth thinking about different decision making principles at this time. So the government has a COBRA, we as a firm have put in place a COBRA team, and this shortens the decision making process in points of crisis. So it's important to think about that and picking up things like how do people feed their points into that group, how does that group act quickly and make sure it's engaging with everyone and meeting the needs around. Setting out some clear priorities at this time, which is, again, not business as usual, but focusing very much, number one, I think we all get the first thing is we want to get this stopped. So ensuring people are safe, they're feeling supported. The impact on people is significant. It's not just the financial point, mental health, it's feeling that they are supported by the organisation that they've been very faithful to for many years. But also then making sure the day-to-day can continue. And things like IT infrastructure, we're all using Skype at the moment. And can your IT infrastructure cope with that increased demand on the work, on the capacity? So thinking about priorities. And then communication. This is a really interesting one that talking to a number of businesses they like, is that single point of truth. The reality is that lots of people will be talking, there'll be lots of rumours and so forth through the organisations and from external sources about what's going on. Those people do not sit in the boardroom and the decision-making room. They do not have access to the facts that are going on. So actually being very clear and upfront with people and saying, this is where information is going to come from and this is what's going on, actually means that it puts people's minds at rest and stops a lot of those stories being spread around, which can cause a lot more disturbance. So now's a good time as well just to sit down as a board and actually seriously think about the priorities and get in place some form of business continuity plan that's going to help at this time. Okay, so just wanted to touch on that. So where probably that's the time broadly, but various links here in terms of places you can go. I've just noticed I haven't got the British Business Bank, so oh no, I have it. Sorry, it's on the right there. So there are various links there for organisations that are here to help and that we've been talking about today. We're putting all of that into our own support hub there, which you can see. So www.bdo.co.uk/en-gb, we're a global firm, so that's the English part, /COVID-19. So there will be stuff, and we'll be putting all the links to other organisations in there as well. As I said, these are going to carry on a weekly basis. Thank you very much to everyone who's joined us, and if anyone has things they want us to talk about in future sessions, please let me know, and we will make sure that we respond to those as well. But otherwise, thank you very much to everyone who's joined, and keep safe out there. Thank you.